Hello, writer, and welcome back to my life. It's Writer Wednesday, the day where I give you my best tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. As per usual, today we're answering a question from one of my $5 patrons on Patreon, and today's question comes to us from Cameron Wicker, who asks, I notice in your books that you don't shy away from bigger topics such as rape, abuse, etc., yet neither do these issues become a center point of your characters or your novels. How do you go into tackling such things without making a drag out of the story? Thanks for the question, Cameron. My answer to this one hinges on my very deeply and strongly held belief that stories should be fun. Not every story, not all the time. There is value in dark stories and darker themes and everything like that. But in general, I think that the best storytelling is storytelling that leaves you feeling good at the end. This is not a belief that's held by everybody, and that's okay. This is sometimes a controversial opinion, and that's okay. But I myself personally do not like to consume a lot of stories or a lot of content that just ends so poorly and so badly and makes me feel just drained and sick and sad about the world and everything. I can only watch one sad downer TV show at a time, and for the last several years that's been Game of Thrones. And that's like why I don't watch The Walking Dead. I mean, it's one of the reasons I don't watch The Walking Dead. I don't really like zombies just in general. But then again, there's zombies in Game of Thrones, so it's like I'd rather have those zombies. And this is why when I watched Breaking Bad, I binged the entire thing. I didn't watch it while it was on. I watched the entire thing in a few-month period in between seasons of Game of Thrones. Because I just don't want to spend multiple hours each week where at the end of each hour I just feel so... I prefer stories that are uplifting to one degree or another, that make you feel better after having read them, and particularly that make you want to be part of the story. And it's funny, Cameron, that you ask, how do I keep my stories from becoming downers by addressing heavy topics? Because I actually think about it in a different way, from a different angle, you might say. And that is that downer topics, heavy topics, serious subject matter is much less effective to me if the story surrounding it and the people it's happening to aren't awesome and fun to be around. To take an all too typical example that many people know and have discussed in more detail and frankly with more skill than I could, look at The Lord of the Rings. The Shire is basically just the best place ever. And the people who come from the Shire are this wonderful blend of charming and cute and funny and hearty, you know, in that very sort of like, all right, we're gonna do this sort of way. All of the hobbits are just the best, except for the Sackville Bagginses. No one likes the Sackville Bagginses. And so when characters from the Shire go out and have their adventures, all of the awful stuff that happens to them, and I feel like people do forget how much awful stuff happens to them, it matters to us because we have seen the default, the place where they started from, and we have seen the sort of people that they themselves are, and we know that these bad things are happening to good people, and that matters. Another example most people will know is Harry Potter, where everything doesn't start off wonderful and idyllic. Harry's whole story and every single book starts off with him in a situation of pretty awful abuse. But he is such a good and kind person, and he is so quickly, and you, the reader, are so quickly shunted off into the magical, entrancing, wonderful world of wizards and witches and magic that becomes your default. Instead of starting off in the wonderful society that you want to read more about all the time, it starts off with things being one way, and then you, the reader, quickly being reassured, no, that's not okay. That's not the way things should be. Here's how it should be. And when that becomes your default, then when dark things happen in the Harry Potter stories, and way dark things happen in the Harry Potter stories, that matters more because it is deconstructing a beautiful world that you have come to love. Again, this is not a criticism of anybody who likes their darker stories and their morally questionable characters and everything like that. That's fine. It's just not my preferred bag. I don't like the trend that I do see of, you know, creating worlds where, I mean, isn't everybody sort of awful in some way? Because no! Not everybody is awful in some way. I just don't believe that. For instance, in Game of Thrones, as much as I like Game of Thrones, and I do like Game of Thrones, it's a well-written story, it's got a lot of really great, well-fleshed-out characters and everything. They're good books, okay? But everything in Westeros is so awful all the time that I become numb to it. No major spoilers for Game of Thrones, but if you know anything about that series, the books or the TV show, you know that people die. Main characters die with alarming regularity. And it's just like, Yeah, okay. There's very little emotional impact on me after the first big one at the end of book 1 or season 1, because that's the norm. That's just what happens. Whereas if you have created a world where the characters are good and believe in honor and justice and good things happening to good people, when bad things happen to good people, that means so much more to you. If everybody is kind of a little bit awful in some way, then I don't care if bad things happen to them as much as I would if they were good people. And if the whole world is awful all the time and everyone who lives in it, who I get to see in the pages, is suffering in some way, then when that suffering increases, it's not a flip, it's not a turn, it's just cranking up the volume, but the noise level is so high that I barely notice. So for me, it's less about how do I keep my books from being downers and being depressing when I'm still tackling heavy subject matter. It's more that I only care about the heavy subject matter because the rest of the book is fun and interesting and dynamic to me. As you said, Cameron, the books of Underrealm do deal with some heavy topics. I will say that I actually do shy away from sexual assault wherever possible. There's one instance of it actually happening in the book, which I hope subverts a lot of normal ways that it's depicted in books. And then there's 1 or 2 references to it in relation to describing characters as the most awful evil villains who pretty much always get a comeuppance. But there is abuse, there is violence, there is deep loss and grief and all those sorts of things. And to me, those things only matter. I only care about them as an author, and hopefully the reader only cares about them because we have seen that this world is mostly a good place, and the main characters who we're journeying through it with are mostly really good, funny, hopefully, and interesting people who we love. Similar to Harry Potter, both Lauren from Nightblade and Eben from the Academy Journals both start off in positions where they're being abused pretty badly, but then they get to go experience a broader world where that isn't the default and the norm. Their new world that they find, their new normal, does include threats of danger, violence, all that sort of thing, but it's no longer something that has complete control over them. It is something in which they are able to actively participate, and it's something that they are able to actively fight against. And the fact that they do fight against it in an interesting setting hopefully makes people really like and enjoy Underrealm as a whole and the people who live in it. So that when dark things do happen, it matters because we've seen that it doesn't have to be that way. And we've seen that the people who it's happening to wouldn't have it be that way if they could, and we get to enjoy them resisting it rather than becoming a part of it or just accepting that that's just the way things are. Here, if you want one, is a litmus test that you can maybe use to determine whether your story is going too dark, too serious, or whether that's becoming the focal point of the story. Would you, as the author, and do you think your readers would want to be there if they could? Would they want to be in this world? Would they want to be going on this journey if they could? How many times have people talked about wanting to go to Middle Earth? If I could go to Middle Earth right now, if I could bring my family with me, I would. If I could go to the magical world of Harry Potter, the world of wizards and witches, I absolutely would. Yes, there are dangers. Yes, bad things could happen, but it is such a basically good and wonderful place, and the journeys and the adventures usually have a good enough ending or a proper resolution that makes you feel like something is right with the world. I want that. That is something that I want to be. I want to inhabit it. It's why I'll read those books just over and over and over again. And I have not met a single person, not one, not a single person who wants to go to Westeros. Nobody wants to go to Westeros. It's always awful there, all the time. And for me, I work very, very hard to, while I am creating adventures that are exciting, that are thrilling, that do present a real sense of danger and darkness to be fought against and overcome, I would go to Underrealm. I would love to be in Underrealm. Seems like a really cool place, and I hope that my readers feel the same way, and they seem to. So that's my litmus test. If, despite the dark things and the bad things that happen to your characters or happen in your world, or despite the bad, is there enough good that you enjoy your time there, that you want to spend more time there? And if so, I think that you have prevented your book from becoming a drag or a downer. And I think that you have created a story that is going to keep people coming back for more as long as you want to keep giving it to them. Thank you so much for the question, Cameron. This was actually a really fun one to answer because it's kind of important to me. A reminder to the rest of you that my $5 patrons like Cameron get these videos 2 weeks in advance, and they are also the only people who are allowed to ask me questions to answer in future videos. So if you want to become one of those awesome and incredibly attractive individuals, click the Patreon link in the description below. You can also pick up the Writer Wednesday t-shirt, which should be on your screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!